Good afternoon. I am Emily Martin, and I am honored to have this opportunity to present my problem of practice to you today. Its title is Conflict, Border Politics, and Ideologies, a qualitative case study of school board member perceptions about their influence on student achievement in rural Louisiana. To make the most of this presentation and the study as a whole, it is crucial that we ground ourselves in two critical definitions. First, student achievement is a phrase that can describe different ideas in different contexts, but for this study, student achievement referred specifically to student performance on annual state and national tests. Second, rurality is another concept that can sometimes be hard to define. For this study, rurality was understood as living in a sparsely populated, geographically distant area marked by population decline, resilience despite limited resources, high visibility among neighbors, and the close social ties characteristic of small town communities. Now, here's the problem. As Louisiana climbed from 49th to 32nd overall in the nation's report card in 2024, only 27% of 8th graders read proficiently, and only 21% of 8th graders were proficient in math. Rural challenges intensify school governance in Louisiana, where 80% of the public school districts meet rural criteria. New qualifications to run for a school board seat in 2026, paired with the enactment of term limits passed in 2012, will change school boards across the state. But regardless of prerequisite knowledge, school board members will become policy and decision makers who work with the superintendent to create plans and oversee district practices that promote student achievement. To explore this problem, I organized my literature review into three parts: rural school board challenges, complexities of school governance, and local school boards and student achievement. When I explored rural school board challenges, the literature elevated the dilemma of rural schooling, the debate about local control, and the relationship between school and community in rural areas. Essentially, regardless of student achievement, rural schools are often the center of rural life, serving as the spine for the whole community. As I dug into the complexities of school governance, the literature divined the role of school boards, described the importance of the board's relationship with the superintendent, and explored the impact of conflicting viewpoints. School boards create policy and oversee the superintendent, but sometimes school board members engage in micromanaging practices that undermine trust within a district. Finally, a growing body of research describes the relationship between local school boards and student achievement. Specific school board practices have been connected to student achievement outcomes, and effective school boards often possess specific characteristics. School boards in high-achieving districts behave differently from those in low-achieving ones, maintaining an acute focus on increasing student achievement. To explore school board dynamics, I selected Achenstein's 2002 micropolitical framework for this study. Achenstein's micropolitical theory includes three primary components shown in this figure: conflict, border politics, and ideology. And these three tenets rest on a continuum. For example, a person within an organization can be avoidant of conflict, or they can embrace it. An avoidant stance would seek to preserve harmony and limit debate, while an embracing stance would own and examine conflict through dissent and open discussion. Essentially, organizations are shaped by how the individual members fall on this spectrum for each component. As such, the purpose of this qualitative case study was to explore how school board members in rural Louisiana perceive the influence of micropolitical factors, specifically conflict, border politics, and ideology, on their leadership practices, and how those leadership practices, in turn, affect student achievement. To do this, I created 2 research questions to drive the study. First, how do school board members in rural Louisiana describe the influence of the micropolitical factors of conflict, border politics, and ideology on their leadership practices? And second, how do micropolitical factors shape how school board members in rural Louisiana describe the influence of their leadership practices on student achievement? I selected a qualitative single case study design because this methodology allowed me to examine the intricate relationships, factors, and contexts of my problem as it occurred and evolved in authentic settings. This methodology also allowed me to gather rich data that helped me understand how school board members described their influence on student achievement and how real-world micropolitical factors influenced them. I utilized data collection types and data analysis protocols that are hallmarks of qualitative research. Through open-ended questionnaires and semi-structured interviews, I gathered robust contextualized data from each participant, and I then utilized a systematic approach to exploring and analyzing that data thematically. Now, let's talk about this study's population. I selected school board members serving in public school districts in rural Louisiana as the population for the study, using 3 inclusion parameters: low population density, less than 75 people per square mile, geographic proximity to the researcher, less than 2 hours from my house, and currently serving on the school board for at least 1 year. From that population, I utilized purposeful criterion sampling to recruit 4 participants. As shown in this table, they came from a variety of school districts, professional backgrounds, educational experiences, years of school board experience, and different demographic characteristics. Additionally, as noted by Louisiana's accountability system known as a District Performance Score, or DPS, their districts were experiencing different levels of student achievement too. And now, after years of work, I'm excited to share the findings from this study. First, in response to the first research question, the study yielded 3 major findings. Most of the school board members who participated in this study experienced conflict as a productive component of empowered leadership. It was characterized by open communication and purposeful actions, in contrast to the avoidance stance of the other. Next, most of the school board members who participated in this study promoted border politics defined by belonging, dialogue, and bridge building across their district, except for one who promoted rigid exclusivity, very protective of her specific constituents. And next, the school board members who participated in this study expressed ideology avoidant views about students and their growth, but they described ideology that embraced transformation and growth in themselves and in other school board members. As for the second research question, things were a bit more unexpected. To the question, how do micropolitical factors shape how school board members in rural Louisiana describe the influence of their leadership practices on student achievement? The short answer is simply, they don't. Micropolitical factors do not shape how school board members in rural Louisiana describe the influence of their leadership practices on student achievement. The reason why, however, was a little surprising. Despite robust descriptions of how their leadership practices influence the business side of their districts, the school board members who participated in this study excluded student achievement from their influence. They viewed student achievement outcomes as the responsibility of boards and positions either above them or below them in a hierarchy chart, but not at all related to their specific work. I did not ask any questions about business dealings, and yet participants gave extensive examples of those experiences, often offered as a replacement for the questions about student achievement. Similarly, one additional theme emerged from the data set, even though no items on the questionnaire or questions during the interview solicited it. This was called the rural dilemma. The school board members who participated in this study described many of their leadership practices and experiences as extensions of their rurality. The same challenges, relationships, stresses, and strengths that echoed throughout the literature on rural school boards came to life through their descriptions. Let's continue that train of thought as we take a look at how my findings integrate into the existing literature. At least some aspect of each finding affirmed the current literature. For example, just as my participants described the importance of productive conflict, Wargo found boards impact change in their districts when they communicate openly and build consensus. Similarly, just as I found that school board members define borders through belonging, Zuckerman found that school board members in high-achieving districts build strong relationships with each other and their superintendent to work together collaboratively and urgently. However, my findings contradicted existing literature at times too. For example, Levine and Van Busick found that effective school board members increase expectations for what students can do. But all four of my participants expressed ideology that avoided making changes to the school experience for students. Similarly, the literature also indicated that board members in high-achieving districts engage in leadership practices that include goal setting, data analysis, and urgent attention to improving student outcomes, as found by Johnson in 2013, affirmed by Delagardelle in 2018, and detailed by Ford and Irk in 2020. But no school board members in my study described any leadership practices related to student achievement. Finally, in terms of the rural dilemma, like I mentioned a minute ago, just as school board members described in the literature experienced close proximity to their constituents as found by Sutherland and struggled with the aftermath of failed single source extraction as found by Met and mourned the loss of community due to school consolidations as described by Williams, the school board members who participated in this study articulated those same uniquely rural experiences without even being asked.
As a result, these findings yield implications and recommendations for four groups. First, rural school board members can embrace conflicting viewpoints and develop leadership practices that foster dialogue. They can understand the influence of rurality and seek training on topics relevant to rural challenges and experiences. Next, rural superintendents can recognize their role in building school board culture and use existing board knowledge of business dealings to enhance student achievement efforts. They can develop practices that promote professional, collaborative relationships and explicitly tie business decisions to student achievement outcomes.
Next up, school board associations. Board members value networking and trading opportunities with other school board members, and they look to their school board organizations to guide and support them. State and national organizations can provide training and networking experiences that develop practices that center student achievement and address rural challenges. And for future researchers, findings imply that they can explore the perceived disconnect between board leadership practices and student achievement. We could even conduct a larger scale mixed method study that includes more rural members in Louisiana to identify behaviors, beliefs, or practices occurring in high achieving and low achieving school districts. Of course, this study was not without its limitations and delimitations. First, in terms of limits, the low sample size limits the transferability of my findings, and because it's a qualitative study, the data collection methods introduce the potential for bias. However, with the delimitations put in place, I believe I countered a good bit of that. By selecting rural school districts in southern Louisiana that were close to my home, I was able to spend time in those districts attending board meetings and meeting the superintendent and the other members of the board before collecting data from the participants. And by interviewing currently serving school board members, I knew that I was gathering data that was relevant to what was currently occurring in our school systems. And finally, the theoretical framework guided every aspect of the study, keeping my focus on the micropolitical components and how those may be influencing leadership practices. In terms of next steps, here's my plan for distribution. I plan to go to board meetings and do presentations in the participating districts to share the findings. I will submit publication applications to the 3 journals listed here, as well as applying to present at upcoming 2027 annual conferences to share this research and to continue the work that we began. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Here are several of the references referenced today. Sic 'em.